I found my adoption papers while cleaning out my dad's desk, along with letters from my real mother, begging to see me for the past 20 years. Dad had been gone for 3 months when I finally worked up the courage to tackle his home office. The stroke took him suddenly. One day he was complaining about the neighbor's barking dog. The next he was in intensive care with machines keeping him alive. I'd been putting off sorting through his things, telling myself I wasn't ready. The desk drawers were exactly what you'd expect from a retired accountant. Rubber bands sorted by size, receipts filed chronologically, tax documents dating back to 1987. But in the bottom drawer, tucked behind a manila folder labeled insurance, I found a wooden box I'd never seen before. It was locked, but the key was taped to the bottom. Inside were documents that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. The adoption certificate was dated 3 days after my supposed birthday. My original birth certificate showed a different last name entirely, Rodriguez instead of Thompson. And underneath both papers was a thick stack of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, all addressed to my father in the same careful handwriting. I opened the first one with trembling fingers, dated 18 years ago. Dear David, please, I'm begging you. Just let me see her once. I know we agreed to a closed adoption, but she's my daughter too. I think about her every single day. Does she like school? Is she happy? The signature at the bottom was Carmen Rodriguez, Alex's birth mother. I grabbed another letter from 10 years ago. Alex turned 13 last week. I drove by Jefferson Middle School hoping to catch a glimpse of her, but I chickened out. I bought her a birthday present anyway, a silver bracelet. It's sitting in my jewelry box with all the other gifts I'll never be able to give her. My hands shook as I read letter after letter. Carmen had been writing to Dad for decades, documenting every milestone she'd missed. She'd graduated from nursing school. She'd gotten married. She'd had another child, my half-brother Diego. She'd sent photos of herself over the years. She must be in high school now. Read one letter from 5 years ago. Does she like music? Does she know she has a half-brother who asks about his big sister every day? I've saved every penny to start a college fund for her. The letters became more desperate over time. Carmen had tried hiring lawyers, private investigators, even showing up at Dad's office. Each attempt was met with legal threats and restraining orders. I saw her at graduation yesterday. I stayed hidden in the parking lot, but I watched her throw her cap in the air. She's so beautiful, David. She has my mother's smile. I wanted to run to her, but I promised I'd respect your wishes. This is killing me. The letter stopped abruptly 2 years ago. I sat on Dad's office floor, surrounded by 20 years of secrets. Every time I'd asked about my birth parents growing up, he'd given me the same story. They were drug addicts who died in a car crash. He'd even taken me to a fake gravesite when I was 12. But Carmen wasn't dead. She'd been alive and desperate to know me this entire time, living just 2 hours away. She'd been watching me grow up from a distance. The worst part was finding Dad's response letters, copies he'd kept of his cruel rejections. Ms. Rodriguez, you relinquished all parental rights. Any further contact will be considered harassment. Alex believes you are deceased, and I intend to keep it that way. Reading those responses made me physically sick. This wasn't the man who'd raised me, the patient father who'd helped with homework and attended every school play. This was someone consumed by grief and paranoia, willing to destroy lives to maintain his illusion of control. I found more evidence of Dad's deception hidden throughout the box. There were private investigator reports he'd commissioned to keep tabs on Carmen's life, not to protect me, but to use against her if she ever tried to make legal contact. He knew about her marriage to Marco, about Diego's birth, about her nursing career. He'd been monitoring her for years while telling me she was dead. There were also emails between Dad and his lawyer, strategizing about how to maintain the lie. In one particularly chilling exchange, the lawyer had suggested simply moving us out of state to make contact impossible. Dad had seriously considered it. The subject continues to send correspondence despite multiple cease and desist orders, the lawyer had written. Relocation would be the most effective permanent solution. Dad's response was dated just 5 years ago. I can't uproot Alex again. She's settled here. But keep monitoring the situation. If Carmen escalates, we may need to consider more drastic measures. I spent the rest of that night reading every single letter, every legal document, every piece of evidence of Dad's systematic campaign to erase Carmen from my life. By dawn, I felt like I'd discovered I was living in some elaborate witness protection program, except the person I was being protected from was my own mother. Carmen had shared details about her life that painted a picture of someone completely different from Dad's lies. She'd been 17 when she got pregnant, abandoned by her boyfriend when she refused to get an abortion, and kicked out by her religious parents who called her a disgrace to the family. But instead of becoming the drug-addicted deadbeat Dad had described, she'd moved into a shelter for pregnant teens, worked 2 jobs while pregnant, and studied for her GED at night. I want you to know, she'd written in one particularly heartbreaking letter, that choosing David and Linda wasn't giving up on you. I was giving you opportunities I couldn't provide. I was barely 18, had no family support, and was making $8 an hour at a grocery store. But I never intended to disappear from your life completely. I thought I'd be Aunt Carmen, someone who could love you and watch you grow up while your real parents gave you stability. The original adoption agreement was in the box too, and it confirmed Carmen's story. The plan had been for an open adoption with regular visits and ongoing contact. There were even specific clauses about Carmen's involvement in major decisions: school choices, medical care, college planning. It was only after my adoptive mother Linda died when I was 3 that Dad had systematically violated every aspect of their agreement. I found records of the legal battles Carmen had fought and lost. She'd hired 3 different lawyers over the years, each one eventually telling her the same thing. Adoption law heavily favors custodial parents, and without evidence of abuse or neglect, courts won't interfere with placement decisions. Her only option would have been a costly, years-long custody battle that could have traumatized me in the process. I can't put her through a legal war, she'd written to one lawyer. She's just a little girl who's already lost one mother. I won't be responsible for more trauma, even if it means I never see her again. That night, I called my Aunt Patricia, Dad's sister who'd always been the family truth teller. If anyone would give me straight answers, it would be her. Patricia, I said, my voice shaking. I found some papers in Dad's desk. About my adoption, about my birth mother. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Oh, sweetheart, she finally whispered. I wondered when this day would come. We all did. You knew about Carmen? About the letters? Of course we knew. Your Uncle Mike, your cousins, Grandpa before he died. We all tried to talk sense into your father, but he wouldn't listen. He was convinced Carmen was going to steal you away. Patricia told me everything Dad had hidden, painting a picture of the first few years of my life that was completely different from what I remembered. Carmen hadn't been absent. She'd been an integral part of my early childhood. The first few years were beautiful, Patricia explained. Carmen would visit every few weeks. You adored her, called her Mama Carmen. She'd bring books and toys, help with bedtime stories. Linda loved having another woman around who understood the adoption dynamics. You essentially had two mothers, and everyone was happy. So what changed? Patricia's voice grew heavy. When Linda got sick with cancer, the stress broke something in your father. He became obsessed with the idea that if Linda died, Carmen would try to take you back. No amount of reasoning could convince him otherwise. Carmen had never given any indication she wanted to disrupt the adoption. Quite the opposite, actually. She was incredibly respectful of boundaries. What happened after Mom died? Your father lost his mind with grief. The day after Linda's funeral, he changed the locks, changed his phone number, and started planning to move you across town. When Carmen showed up for your regular visit that weekend, she found strangers living in your house. I felt sick. She didn't know Mom had died? Your father didn't tell her. Carmen found out about Linda's death from the newspaper obituary 3 weeks later. She was devastated, not just because she'd lost a friend, but because she realized what it meant for her relationship with you. How long did it take her to find us after we moved? Months. She hired a private investigator, but your father had been thorough. New address, new phone number, even a new school for you. By the time she tracked you down, your father had already told you she was dead. Patricia's voice broke. We all watched it happen, Alex. Your whole extended family knew what your father was doing, and we were powerless to stop it. Carmen tried reaching out to us, begging us to intervene, but your father threatened to cut us off completely if we helped her. So everyone just let it happen? We were cowards, Patricia admitted. We were afraid of losing you too. Your father was so volatile after Linda died, so paranoid about anyone he saw as a threat. We told ourselves he'd come to his senses eventually, that he'd let Carmen back into your life when his grief settled. We never imagined he'd maintain the lie for 20 years. Did you ever try to contact her? To let her know I was okay? Mike did once. He called her about 10 years ago, just to tell her you were healthy and doing well in school. Carmen broke down crying on the phone, begging him for just one photo, one update about your interests or friends. Mike was so shaken by her pain that he promised to try to convince your father to reconsider. What happened? Your father found out about the call and threatened to move you out of state immediately. He accused Mike of betraying the family, of putting you in danger. The fight was so bad they didn't speak for 2 years. I hung up feeling dizzy with anger and grief. My entire childhood had been built on a foundation of lies, and the woman who'd been desperate to love me had been painted as a villain to justify her absence. Even worse, my own extended family had been complicit in the deception, choosing their relationship with Dad over the truth. I immediately started searching social media. Carmen Rodriguez, Springfield. It took less than 10 minutes to find her. She was stunning. The same dark eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. The same stubborn cowlick that made my hair stick up on the left side. The same crooked smile I'd inherited but never understood the origin of. Her profile showed a rich, full life. Photos of family barbecues, her son Diego playing soccer, her working at Springfield Children's Hospital wearing scrubs with cartoon characters, her husband Marco cooking elaborate dinners while she laughed in the background. But there was something wistful in her eyes in every photo. A sadness that never quite disappeared even when she was smiling. In pictures with Diego, she sometimes looked just past the camera, as if she was thinking about someone who should have been there. And there, in her bio, missing my daughter Alexandra, 23 years old now, never stopped hoping, never stopped loving. My heart nearly stopped. She'd kept track of my age, kept my full name instead of the nickname everyone called me, and she'd never remarried her heart to completely start over. She'd built a life that always included space for me to return. I spent 3 sleepless days crafting the perfect message, deleting and rewriting it dozens of times. How do you reach out to someone who's been erased from your life? How do you apologize for 20 years of absence that wasn't your fault? How do you even begin to heal that kind of wound? Finally, I settled on something simple. Hi, Carmen. I think you might be my birth mother. I'm Alexandra, but everyone calls me Alex. I just found your letters in my dad's desk after he passed away 3 months ago. I'd like to talk if you're willing. I have so many questions, and I'm so sorry it took this long to find you. I included my phone number and hit send before I could lose my nerve. She responded within minutes. Alex? Oh my God, is it really you? I've been waiting for this message for 20 years. I'm shaking. I can't believe this is happening. Please call me, please. Day or night. I don't care what time. I love you so much. I never stopped loving you. My number is 2117-555-0847. I stared at those 10 digits for an hour before finally dialing. She answered before the first ring finished. Alex? Her voice was exactly how I'd imagined. Warm but tentative, like she was afraid I might hang up or disappear again. Hi, I said, and immediately started crying. Oh, baby, she whispered. I've missed you so much. Are you okay? Are you safe? God, I have so many questions. I don't know where to start. Tell me everything. Tell me about your life. Are you happy? Are you healthy? I'm okay. I managed between sobs. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry I never knew to look for you. Dad told me you were dead. He took me to a fake grave and everything. A fake grave? The pain in her voice was palpable. Green Hills Cemetery. He even had a headstone made with fake names. I used to bring you flowers every Mother's Day. The silence that followed was heartbreaking. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Oh, sweetheart. I can't imagine how confusing and painful that must have been. All those years, you were mourning parents who weren't dead while I was 2 hours away, thinking about you every single day. We talked for 6 hours that first night. She told me about her son, Diego, who was 15 and had always known about his big sister. About her husband, Marco, who'd helped her write those letters and driven her past my school every year on my birthday, just hoping to catch a glimpse of me. About the college fund she'd been building since I was 5, now worth almost $40,000. I have a photo album, she said hesitantly. Pictures of you from your school websites, newspaper clippings when you made honor roll, even a few I took from far away at public events. I know it sounds like stalking, but it's not stalking, I interrupted. It's love. Dad convinced me you didn't want me, that you'd abandoned me because I wasn't worth fighting for. But you never stopped fighting, did you? Never, she said firmly. Not for one single day. Even when the lawyers told me I had no legal options. Even when your father threatened restraining orders. Even when everyone said I should move on and start over. I couldn't give up on you. She told me about the lengths she'd gone to stay connected to my life. She'd volunteered at blood drives at my high school, hoping to see me. She'd attended community theater productions I was in, sitting in the back row with a baseball cap pulled low. When I'd won the county art contest in 10th grade, she'd bought 3 copies of the newspaper and framed the article. I was at your high school graduation, she admitted. I wore sunglasses and stayed way in the back of the parking lot, but I watched you walk across that stage. I was so proud I couldn't stop shaking. Dad knew you'd be there? Her voice turned bitter. I always told him in my letters when I'd be at your events. I thought maybe if he saw how much I cared, how I wasn't trying to disrupt your life but just wanted to witness your milestones from a distance, he might soften his heart. I was naive. Did he ever respond to your letters? Only with legal threats. Every few years, his lawyer would send me a cease and desist letter, warning me that any contact could be considered stalking. But I couldn't stop writing to you. It was the only connection I had. She told me about Marco, who'd entered her life when I was 8. He'd been recently divorced with no children of his own, and she'd been upfront about her situation from their first date. I told him I came with invisible baggage, she said, that I had a daughter I couldn't see but would never stop loving. I expected him to run, but he said he understood what it meant to lose someone you love. His ex-wife had taken his stepson across the country, and he'd had to learn to love someone from a distance, too. Marco had not only supported her quest to reconnect with me, he'd actively helped. He'd driven her to my school events, helped her write letters, and even researched legal options when new adoption reform laws were passed. He bought me a camera with a telephoto lens for my birthday one year, she said, laughing through tears, so I could take better pictures of you from far away. Most women get jewelry. I got spy equipment. She told me about Diego's reaction when they'd explained he had a big sister he might never meet. He was about 7 when we told him, she said. He asked if you were dead, and I said no, you were just somewhere we couldn't reach. He started drawing pictures of our family with 4 people instead of 3, always leaving space for you. Every Christmas, he'd ask Santa to bring his sister home. Does he resent me for taking up so much of your emotional energy? The opposite, she said. He's been my biggest supporter in staying connected to you. When I'd get discouraged, when the lawyers would tell me to give up, Diego would remind me that sisters don't abandon each other. He'd say, Mom, Alex doesn't know she has a family looking for her. We have to keep trying so she can find us. We made plans to meet the following weekend. She lived in Springfield, just 2 hours away. She deliberately stayed close all these years, just in case. The night before I was supposed to drive there, I barely slept. 23 years of wondering about my origins were about to be answered. But first, I had something I needed to do. I drove to the cemetery where Dad was buried, carrying the stack of letters and the wooden box. It was a gray October afternoon, the kind of day that makes everything look exhausted. I sat beside his headstone and read him every single letter out loud, all 247 of them. My voice was hoarse by the end. Dear Dad, I said when I finished. I understand why you were scared after Mom died. Losing the love of your life broke something in you, and you were terrified of losing me too. But Carmen wasn't your enemy. She was Mom's friend, and she could have helped you raise me. I pulled out one of his response letters, the cruelest one, where he'd threatened to move out of state if Carmen didn't stop contacting him. This wasn't protection, Dad. This was cruelty. You robbed me of a mother who wanted nothing more than to love me, and you robbed her of the daughter she fought to place in a good home. You turned an open adoption into a closed one without her consent, and you lied to both of us for decades. I opened the wooden box and showed him the evidence of his deception. You kept all of this. Every letter, every legal document, every piece of proof of what you'd done. Part of you knew it was wrong, didn't it? Part of you knew I'd find out someday. An older man walking his dog stopped nearby, probably thinking I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. I forgive you because I know you were hurting, I continued. But I won't pretend what you did was right. Carmen deserved better. I deserved better. And Mom deserved to have her wishes honored instead of buried with her. I left the letters on his grave, weighed down with rocks. I hope you find peace, Dad. And I hope somehow you understand that love isn't a finite resource. Loving Carmen doesn't diminish what I felt for you. The next Saturday, I drove to Springfield with shaking hands and a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite according to her Facebook posts. Carmen's house was a modest ranch with a well-tended garden and children's bikes in the driveway. The mailbox had Rodriguez Martinez painted in cheerful blue letters. She must have been watching from the window because the front door opened before I could knock. We stood there staring at each other for a full minute, both afraid to move in case we shattered the moment. She was smaller than I'd expected, barely reaching my shoulder, with premature gray threading through her dark hair. But her eyes were exactly like mine, and when she smiled, I saw my own crooked grin reflected back at me for the first time in my life. "You're so beautiful," she said, tears streaming down her face. "So are you," I replied. She reached out tentatively, like she was afraid I might disappear. I stepped into her arms and we both dissolved. 20 years of missing each other collapsed into that moment. We held each other in her doorway, sobbing like the world was ending and beginning at the same time. "I can't believe you're here," she whispered into my hair. "I can't believe you're real. I've dreamed about this moment so many times." "I can't believe you waited for me," I replied. Diego appeared from inside the house, lanky and awkward at 15, with my eyes and my stubborn cowlick and a soccer ball under his arm. "So you're the famous sister," he said, grinning. "Mom talks about you literally every day. It's honestly kind of annoying." "Diego," Carmen scolded, but she was laughing. "What? It's true. Alex would be starting college now. I wonder if Alex likes art like I do. Do you think Alex knows she has a brother? It's like living with a ghost sometimes. But a good ghost," he added quickly. "I always wanted to meet you." He was taller than both of us, with an easy confidence that spoke of being raised with unconditional love. When he hugged me, it felt natural, like we'd been siblings all along instead of strangers. Marco appeared behind him, a quiet man with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of manual labor. He hung back to let us have our moment, but when Carmen introduced us, he hugged me tight and whispered, "Welcome home, mija. Your mother's been counting the days. 20 years, 3 months, and 16 days, Carmen said, laughing through tears. But who's counting? They'd prepared for this visit like it was Christmas, and my birthday rolled into one. Carmen had cleaned the house until it sparkled, cooked enough food for an army, and set up the guest room with fresh flowers and a photo album on the nightstand. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to stay over," she said nervously, "but I wanted you to know you're welcome here. This is your home too, if you want it to be." The photo album was overwhelming. Carmen had documented my entire life from afar, pictures she'd somehow gathered from school websites, social media screenshots, even local newspaper articles when I'd made honor roll or performed in school plays. She'd created a parallel version of my childhood, experiencing my milestones from a distance. "This is from your 8th grade science fair," she said, pointing to a blurry photo. "I volunteered to help set up, just so I could see your project about renewable energy. You got 2nd place. You were there?" "I was there for everything I could manage. Piano recitals, art shows, soccer games when you played JV sophomore year. I became an expert at blending into crowds." She showed me photos I'd never seen, myself at 10 years old, completely unaware that my birth mother was taking my picture from across a school auditorium. Me at 13, walking out of the library while Carmen sat in her car, documenting another day in my life. "Wasn't it torture?" I asked. "Being so close, but not being able to approach me?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "But it was also the only way I could feel connected to you. Seeing you healthy and happy, watching you grow into this incredible person, it kept me going during the darkest times." That evening, over dinner, Diego asked the question I'd been avoiding. "So what happens now? Are you going to move here? Are we going to be a real family?" I looked around the table, at Carmen, who'd spent 20 years loving me from a distance, at Marco, who'd supported her through decades of heartbreak and helped her raise a son who'd always known about his missing sister, at Diego, who'd grown up hearing stories about the big sister he might never meet. "I don't know," I admitted. "This is all so new, but I want to try. I want to get to know all of you, to figure out how to be a family after all this time apart." Carmen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "There's no pressure," she said. "We have time now, all the time in the world." But even as she said it, I could see the fear in her eyes. The terror that I might disappear again, that this reunion might be temporary. "I'm not going anywhere," I said firmly. "I've spent my whole life feeling like something was missing, and now I know what it was. You're not getting rid of me that easily." The transition wasn't seamless. 20 years of lies don't evaporate overnight. I struggled with anger toward Dad, guilt for not finding Carmen sooner, and the surreal experience of suddenly having a family I'd never known existed. Some days I felt like I was betraying Dad's memory by loving the woman he'd worked so hard to erase. Other days I was furious at him all over again. Carmen and I started slowly. Weekly dinners, phone calls every few days, getting to know each other as adults rather than trying to recreate a mother-daughter relationship that had been stolen from us. We had to learn each other's rhythms, preferences, ways of communicating. It was like being set up on the world's most important blind date. "I don't want to be your mother," she said one evening about a month after we'd reunited. "I mean, I am your mother, but I can't pretend I raised you. I don't want to compete with your memories of Linda or try to parent someone who's already an adult." "Then what do you want to be?" I asked. She thought for a long moment. "Your friend, maybe? Someone who loves you unconditionally and wants to be part of your life going forward?" "I'd like that," I said. "But can you also be the person who tells me embarrassing stories about my baby years and gets emotional at my wedding someday?" "Absolutely," she said, tears in her eyes. Diego was easier to connect with. He treated me like the big sister he'd always imagined, asking for college advice and showing me his soccer highlights. He had no baggage about our relationship. To him, I was simply the missing piece of his family that had finally come home. "It's weird," he said one day as we walked around their neighborhood. "I used to make up stories about what you were like. I imagined you were probably really smart and good at art since Mom is. Turns out I was right. What else did you imagine? That you'd be kind of sad, he said matter-of-factly. Mom always looked so heartbroken when she talked about you. I figured if you'd grown up without her, you'd probably feel that sadness too, even if you didn't know why. He was right. There had always been a hollow space in my chest that I'd never been able to name. Growing up, I'd felt different from other kids, like I was missing some essential piece of myself. I'd attributed it to being adopted, but now I realized it was the absence of Carmen, the phantom limb of a relationship that had been severed too early. Do you miss your dad? Diego asked. It was a complicated question that I'd been wrestling with for months. I miss the father I thought he was, I said finally. But learning about what he did to Carmen and to me changes everything. It's hard to grieve someone when you're also angry at them. Mom says grief and anger can exist at the same time, Diego said. She's been angry at him for 20 years, but she also felt bad when he died because she knew how much he loved him. 3 months after our reunion, Carmen asked if I wanted to see my baby photos. She'd kept everything from those first 3 years. Hospital bracelets, first birthday decorations, even a lock of hair from my first haircut. I was there for all of this, she said softly, flipping through the album. Your dad didn't start erasing me until after Linda died. The photos showed a different version of my early childhood than I remembered. There I was as a toddler, sitting on Carmen's lap at Christmas. There was Carmen teaching me to walk, feeding me birthday cake on my second birthday, reading me bedtime stories. I had no memory of any of it, but the evidence was undeniable. She'd been my second mother for the first 3 years of my life. Linda and I were friends, Carmen explained. She understood that loving you wasn't a competition. We talked every day, shared parenting duties, made decisions together. She used to joke that you were lucky to have 2 mothers who adored you. That's when I learned the final devastating piece of the story. My adoptive mother, the woman I'd called Mom until she died when I was 3, had not only supported the relationship with Carmen, they'd been genuine friends. Carmen would visit regularly, and I'd known her as Mama Carmen, who always brought the best presents and gave the best hugs. Linda made me promise to always be part of your life, Carmen said, tears in her eyes. Even if something happened to her, I was supposed to help raise you. She said you needed as much love as possible, from as many people as possible. I stared at a photo of Linda, Carmen, and baby me at a park. They were both smiling, looking like the co-mothers they'd intended to be. So, Dad betrayed Mom's wishes too? Grief changes people, Carmen said gently. I don't think he was thinking clearly. He was so afraid of losing you that he destroyed the very support system Linda had wanted you to have. I started seeing a therapist to help process the complexity of my emotions. Dr. Sarah Martinez specialized in adoption trauma and helped me understand that my anger toward Dad didn't negate the love I'd felt for him, and that loving Carmen didn't betray his memory. Your father was operating from a place of profound fear, she explained. When we're terrified, we sometimes make choices that create the very outcomes we're trying to prevent. He was so afraid of losing you that he isolated you from people who could have provided additional love and support. But how do I reconcile the father who read me bedtime stories with the man who kept those cruel letters? People contain multitudes, Dr. Martinez said. Your father was capable of great love and terrible cruelty, often simultaneously. Accepting that complexity is part of healing. The more I learned, the angrier I became. Not just at Dad, but at the system that had allowed him to sever a relationship that had been healthy and beneficial for everyone involved. I started researching adoption law, horrified to discover how little protection birth parents have once they've signed relinquishment papers. I began volunteering with adoption support groups, sharing my story and advocating for better protections for birth-parent relationships. Carmen joined me, speaking to prospective adoptive parents about the importance of honoring commitments to birth families. Open adoption isn't just better for birth parents, she'd tell them. It's better for children too. Alex grew up with a hole in her heart that she couldn't name. She had questions I could have answered, medical history I could have provided, love I was desperate to give. Severing those connections serves no one. We started getting invitations to speak at adoption conferences and social worker training programs. Our story became a cautionary tale about what happens when fear overrides compassion, when parents prioritize their own insecurities over their children's needs. The tragedy isn't just that we lost 20 years together, Carmen would say during our presentations. It's that Alex grew up believing she wasn't worth fighting for, while I lived with the guilt of thinking I'd failed her as a mother. Fear doesn't just destroy relationships, it destroys the people in them. A year after our reunion, I was planning my wedding to Jake, a man I'd been dating for 3 years. He'd been incredibly supportive throughout this whole journey, driving with me to meet Carmen, holding my hand through the anger and grief, and welcoming my newfound family with open arms. The question of who would walk me down the aisle became complicated. Traditionally, it would have been Dad, but he was gone. My Uncle Mike had offered, but it felt wrong to have someone who'd been complicit in the cover-up play such an important role. What if Carmen walked with you? Jake suggested one evening as we addressed wedding invitations. Is that weird? Having your birth mother walk you down the aisle? Weirder than having a fake grave for her while she sits in the front row? He replied. Besides, she's the one who's been fighting to be part of your life. She's earned the right to give you away. When I asked Carmen, she broke down crying. I never thought I'd get to be part of your wedding, she said. I used to dream about it, helping you pick out a dress, giving you advice about marriage, dancing at your reception, but I never really believed it would happen. Well, it's happening, I said, and I can't imagine anyone else walking me down that aisle. My Uncle Mike graciously stepped aside when I explained the situation. She should have been here all along, he told me privately. Your dad was wrong, and we all knew it. We should have fought harder to make him see reason. Why didn't you? Mike looked ashamed. Because we were cowards. We were afraid of losing you too, so we enabled your father's paranoia instead of standing up for what was right. Carmen was the only one who had the courage to keep fighting, even when everyone told her to give up. The wedding planning became a bonding experience for Carmen and me. She helped me choose flowers, tasted cakes, and offered advice about marriage based on her relationship with Marco. The secret, she said as we looked at wedding dresses, is remembering that you're choosing to love someone every single day. Love isn't just a feeling, it's a decision you make over and over again. Is that how you felt about me during all those years apart? Every single day, she said firmly. Even when it would have been easier to give up, even when everyone said I should move on, I chose to keep loving you. That's what real love does. It endures. In her wedding speech, Carmen said something that still makes me cry. 20 years ago, I thought I'd lost my daughter forever. I wondered if I'd made the right choice placing her for adoption, if I should have fought harder to keep her despite my circumstances. But watching Alex today, brilliant, kind, surrounded by love, I know that every sacrifice was worth it. The years apart were painful, but they led us to this moment. Alex, you were worth every tear, every sleepless night, every letter that went unanswered. Having you back is proof that some stories get their happy endings, even when they take longer than we hoped. Diego gave a speech too, joking that he'd finally gotten the big sister he'd been bragging about since kindergarten. I may have had to wait 15 years to meet her, he said, but it turns out Alex is exactly as awesome as Mom always said she'd be. Plus, she's way better at helping with math homework than Mom is. Jake's speech thanked Carmen specifically. Alex always felt like something was missing, like she was searching for something she couldn't name. Meeting Carmen didn't just give her a mother back, it gave her the missing piece of herself. Thank you, Carmen, for never giving up on her. The hardest part of this whole experience has been reconciling my love for Dad with the magnitude of his betrayal. He wasn't a villain. He was a grief-stricken widower who made catastrophic decisions out of fear, but his choices robbed me of 20 years with a woman who loved me unconditionally, and robbed Carmen of watching her daughter grow up. I still visit his grave sometimes, but now I bring updates instead of anger. I tell him about Carmen's promotion to head nurse at the children's hospital, about Diego's acceptance to college on a soccer scholarship, about the grandchildren he'll never meet because he was too afraid to trust in love. I understand why you were scared, I told his headstone during my last visit. Losing Mom broke something in you, but Carmen wasn't your enemy. She was Mom's friend, and she could have helped you raise me. Instead of having one grieving parent, I could have had a village of people who loved me. Your fear created the very loneliness you were trying to protect me from. Carmen and I have started a nonprofit organization called the Alexandra Foundation, using my middle name to honor both sides of my identity. We help other families navigate open adoption relationships and provide support for birth parents whose contact has been severed. We've helped reunite dozens of families and prevented countless others from being torn apart by fear and misunderstanding. Your story gives people hope, Carmen said recently as we reviewed applications for our new support group. When they see that love can survive 20 years of separation, it helps them believe that their relationships can be repaired too. One of our most successful programs is a mediation service for adoptive families struggling with open adoption agreements. We help birth parents and adoptive parents communicate their fears and boundaries in healthy ways, preventing the kind of breakdown that happened in my family. Most of these conflicts come from fear, Carmen explained to a room full of social workers. Adoptive parents are afraid birth parents will try to reclaim their children. Birth parents are afraid they'll be forgotten or excluded. Both sides love the same child and want what's best for them, but fear makes them see each other as enemies instead of allies. We also lobby for legislative changes to adoption law, advocating for stronger protections for birth-parent relationships and clearer guidelines about when contact can be severed. The current system treats birth parents like sperm donors, I told a committee of state legislators. Once they sign those papers, they have fewer rights than divorced parents. That's not just wrong, it's harmful to the children these laws are supposed to protect. Last week, Carmen and I were going through more of her saved memories when she pulled out a small jewelry box I'd never seen before. I bought this for your 16th birthday, she said. I know it's 10 years too late, but inside was a delicate silver necklace with a heart pendant. Engraved on the back were the words, "Love doesn't end, it waits." I had it made right after your father cut off contact, she explained. I wanted something that would remind me that even if I couldn't see you, my love for you was still real and still growing. I've carried it with me every day since then. I wear it every day now, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful love stories aren't about finding someone new, they're about finding someone who never stopped looking for you. The box of letters that started this whole journey sits on my bookshelf now, next to photo albums Carmen and I make together. Sometimes I reread them, marveling at her persistence, her faith that someday we'd find each other again. Each letter is a testament to a mother's love, proof that bonds can survive decades of separation if they're strong enough. Diego is applying to colleges now, and he's asked me to help him with his application essays. One of his topics is about family, and he wrote, "People always ask if it's weird having a sister I didn't grow up with, but the truth is, Alex was always part of our family. She lived in Mom's stories, in the empty bedroom we kept ready for her. In the fourth place, Mom would sometimes accidentally sit at the dinner table. When she finally came home, it wasn't like meeting a stranger. It was like a missing piece of our family puzzle finally clicking into place." Carmen keeps a photo of the four of us, her, Marco, Diego, and me, on her desk at work. Her colleagues say she lights up whenever she talks about her children, plural, and how long she waited to be able to use that word honestly. For 20 years, people would ask if I had kids, and I never knew how to answer, she told me recently. Saying yes felt like a lie since I wasn't raising you. Saying no felt like I was erasing you completely. Now I can finally say, yes, I have two beautiful children, without my heart breaking. Dad thought he was protecting me from heartbreak. Instead, he was protecting me from the greatest love I've ever known. Carmen didn't give birth to me and disappear. She gave birth to me and spent 20 years fighting to come home. Now she has. And for the first time in my life, I feel complete. I discovered my entire family was in witness protection, and our whole life was fabricated. So I Googled our real names and found out why. I was 19 when I found the documents hidden in Dad's office. I'd gone in looking for my birth certificate to apply for a passport, my first time traveling abroad for college. Instead of the simple folder I expected, I found a manila envelope marked WITSEC Relocation, Confidential. Inside were IDs with our faces but different names. My parents weren't David and Linda Morrison. They were Anthony and Catherine Rossetti. My little brother wasn't cute, innocent Tyler. He was Marco. And I wasn't Emma Morrison, honor student and future teacher. I was Sophia Rossetti. The names felt foreign in my mouth, but something about them triggered a buried memory. Whispered arguments late at night. Dad checking locks obsessively. Mom's habit of scanning parking lots before getting out of the car. How we'd moved 3 times before I turned 10, always with the same explanation. Dad got a better job opportunity. My hands shook as I photographed everything with my phone. Federal paperwork dated 15 years ago. New social security numbers. A relocation agreement signed by both parents. At the bottom, a case number and the name of a U.S. Marshal. The more I read, the more pieces clicked into place. Why we never talked about extended family. Why there were no baby photos of me or Tyler before age 4. Why Mom sometimes woke up screaming from nightmares she refused to discuss. Why Dad carried a gun in his briefcase, something I'd discovered years ago but never questioned. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep, then crept into the basement with my laptop. My heart pounded as I typed Anthony Rossetti into the search bar. Part of me hoped I'd find nothing, that this was all some elaborate mistake or misunderstanding. The results made my blood run cold. News articles from 2008 filled my screen. Headlines screamed about organized crime, racketeering, and a massive FBI investigation that brought down half of Chicago's crime families. Anthony Rossetti wasn't just mentioned. He was a key witness whose testimony had put away 12 people, including his own brother. I clicked on a photo from the Chicago Tribune. There was Dad, 15 years younger, walking into federal court flanked by U.S. Marshals. The caption read, "Star witness Anthony Rossetti arrives to testify against the Benedetti crime family." The article detailed how Dad had been the Benedetti family's accountant, managing their money laundering operations through a chain of restaurants. When the FBI raided their headquarters, they'd offered him a deal, testify against everyone, or spend 30 years in prison. But what made me physically sick was reading further down the page. Mom's maiden name had been Catherine Benedetti. She wasn't just married to the accountant, she was the boss's daughter. My father had betrayed his wife's own family to save himself. I searched for more information about the Benedetti family, and what I found made me understand why we'd been running for 15 years. The organization had tentacles reaching across 3 states: drug trafficking, illegal gambling, contract killings, and according to multiple news sources, they had a reputation for never forgetting betrayal. A 2010 article mentioned that 2 other witnesses from the same case had been found dead despite being in protective custody. One had his cover blown when he tried to contact his elderly mother. The other had been identified by a former associate at a grocery store in Phoenix. Their deaths weren't quick or clean. I kept searching until I found what I was dreading: a forum post from just 6 months ago on a crime enthusiast website. Whatever happened to Anthony Rossetti, the snitch who brought down the Benedettis? Someone should find that rat. The responses made my stomach churn. People posting theories about where Dad might be hiding. Someone had even uploaded an age progression photo showing what he might look like now. It was eerily accurate. Then I found the news article that changed everything. Vincent Benedetti released after serving reduced sentence. The date was 2 weeks ago. Vincent Benedetti was Uncle Vincent, Mom's brother, the man who taught me to ride a bike and snuck me extra dessert at family dinners. At least that's what my fragmented childhood memories told me. The article mentioned that he'd been a model prisoner, earning early release for good behavior. It quoted his lawyer saying that Vincent was looking forward to reconnecting with family and settling old scores in a legal manner. The phrasing sent chills down my spine. I cross-referenced the release date with our family's recent behavior. Dad's sudden insistence on updating our security system 3 weeks ago. Mom's new habit of varying her route to work. The way they'd both insisted Tyler and I check in more frequently when we were out. They knew. They'd known for weeks that our worst nightmare was walking free. I spent the next 3 hours researching everything I could find about Vincent Benedetti. Court records painted a picture of a man who'd built his empire through calculated violence. The FBI had connected him to at least 7 murders, though they'd only been able to prove 3. But the most disturbing discovery came when I found a recent interview he'd given to a local Chicago paper upon his release. "Family is everything," he'd said. "Blood is thicker than water, and some betrayals can never be forgiven or forgotten." When asked about his plans, he'd smiled and said, "I'm going to reconnect with everyone who matters to me. Some people think distance and time can erase the past. They're wrong." The journalist had pressed him about his brother-in-law's testimony. Vincent's response was chilling. Anthony made his choice. Now he has to live with the consequences. Him and his family. I realized I was crying, not just from fear, but from grief. Everything I'd believed about my life, my family, my identity, it was all smoke and mirrors. The loving extended family I'd mourned losing in childhood hadn't been lost to distance or death. They'd been lost to betrayal. But worse than that was the growing certainty that our time was running out. I searched deeper into our family history. Mom's family had run Benedetto's restaurant for 3 generations. It wasn't just a business, it was the center of their world. Sunday dinners with 30 relatives, weddings that lasted 3 days, baptisms where the entire neighborhood showed up. I found photos on the restaurant's old website. There was Mom at 16, helping in the kitchen, Dad at 18, awkward in a server's apron. Apparently, he'd started working there to pay for college. And there was Uncle Vincent, always in the center of every photo, arm around whoever was nearest. That same smile I remembered from childhood. Reading between the lines of various news articles, I pieced together what had really happened. Dad hadn't started as a criminal. He'd been an accounting student who fell in love with the boss's daughter. Vincent had given him a job to help pay for school. But gradually, Dad had gotten pulled deeper into the family business, the real family business. By the time he realized what he was involved in, he was already guilty of money laundering on a massive scale. When the FBI closed in, they offered him a choice: cooperate or spend the rest of his life in prison. What they hadn't told him was that cooperation would mean destroying his wife's family and turning his children into permanent refugees. I found the court transcripts from Dad's testimony, page after page of him detailing financial crimes, describing meetings where violence was planned, naming names of people who trusted him. He'd worn a wire for 6 months before the arrests. He'd been recording his own family. The betrayal was comprehensive. He hadn't just testified about business operations. He'd given up Uncle Vincent's location when the man was trying to flee. He'd provided bank account information that led to asset seizures worth millions. He'd even testified about Mom's involvement in the money laundering, though she'd been granted immunity in exchange for his cooperation. Reading those transcripts, I understood now why Mom sometimes flinched when Dad touched her, why she'd developed an obsession with true crime podcasts, why she'd homeschooled us for 3 years for better education, when really, she'd been terrified of sending us to public school. She hadn't just lost her family, she'd watched her husband destroy them. But what I found next made everything else seem trivial. A crime forum post from 3 days ago. Vincent B. spotted at O'Hare Airport. Looks like he's heading somewhere specific. The responses were from people who seemed to know exactly who Vincent B. was and why his travel plans mattered. About time. Rats need exterminating. Hope he finds what he's looking for. Some debts take 15 years to collect. I searched flight records, something I probably shouldn't have been able to access, but Tyler had taught me some questionable computer skills during his hacker phase. Vincent had flown from Chicago to Kansas City 2 days ago. He was only 3 hours away from us. My hands were shaking as I closed the laptop and crept back upstairs. I stood outside my parents' bedroom door, listening to Dad's restless tossing. Through the crack under the door, I could see light. He was awake, probably scrolling through news alerts on his phone, searching for any mention of Vincent's movements. I thought about Tyler, sleeping peacefully in his room, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire identity was fabricated. He'd been 4 when we entered protection. He had no memory of our real lives, our real family, our real selves. To him, we were the Morrisons, and we always had been. But I remembered. Fragments were coming back now with startling clarity. A grandmother who called me Little Sophie and let me help make pasta every Sunday. Uncle Vincent lifting me onto his shoulders at the restaurant, sneaking me tastes of sauce before dinner. Cousin Maria teaching me to braid friendship bracelets. A whole extended family who'd loved me completely and who now probably considered me dead, or worse, a traitor's daughter. I remembered the night everything changed. I'd been 4, maybe 5. Men in suits had come to our house. Mom was crying. Dad was packing frantically, throwing our belongings into garbage bags. Someone kept saying we had to leave right now, that people were coming for us. They told us it was a game, a fun adventure to a new place. For years, I'd believed that story. Even when the nightmares started, dreams of men in dark cars following us, of Mom screaming at someone to leave us alone. Now I realize those weren't nightmares. They were memories. I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, I confronted them at breakfast. Tyler had already left for school. Basketball practice started early on Fridays. I know, I said simply, placing printouts of the newspaper articles on the kitchen table. Mom's coffee cup clattered against her saucer. Dad went completely still. Emma, Mom started. Sophia, I corrected. My name is Sophia Rossetti, and I know exactly what you did. Dad closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked older than I'd ever seen him. How much do you know? He asked quietly. Everything. The testimony. Uncle Vincent. The fact that he's been out of prison for 2 weeks and is currently somewhere in Missouri. Mom's face went white. How could you possibly know that? I showed them the flight records and forum posts. People are tracking his movements. They're celebrating the fact that he's hunting us. Dad buried his face in his hands. Jesus Christ. We should have moved last week when Webb called. Webb? Marshall Webb, Mom explained. Our handler. She warned us about Vincent's release, but we thought we had more time. Why didn't you tell us? I demanded. Because Tyler's finally happy here, Mom said, tears starting. He has friends. He made varsity basketball. He has a girlfriend. And you're about to graduate. We thought maybe if we just kept our heads down. You thought what? That love conquers all? That family loyalty expires after 15 years? Dad's voice was bitter. Vincent spent every day in prison planning what he'd do to us when he got out. This isn't something we can run from forever. Then why do you keep trying? The question hung in the air between us. Dad looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. Not just the recognition that I wasn't a child anymore, but something deeper, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. What do you want from us, Sophia? He asked, using my real name for the first time in my memory. I want the truth, all of it, and then I want us to figure out how to end this. Mom started to protest, but Dad held up a hand. She's right. he said quietly. She deserves to know what she's running from. For the next hour, they told me everything. Dad had been 22 when he'd started working at Benedetto's. He'd been studying accounting at Northwestern, working nights and weekends to pay for school. Vincent had hired him initially for legitimate work. The restaurant did have real customers and real income, but gradually, Dad had been pulled into the family's other businesses. At first, it was just creative bookkeeping, making certain income streams look more legitimate than they were. Then it was moving money between accounts, creating paper trails that would confuse auditors. I told myself I was just helping a family business, Dad said. Vincent treated me like a son. Your mother and I were planning to get married. I thought I was part of something good. By the time Dad realized the full scope of what the Benedettis were involved in, he was already complicit in millions of dollars worth of money laundering. And Mom was pregnant with me. I wanted out, Dad said. But Vincent made it clear that people don't just leave the family. Ever. The FBI had been watching the Benedettis for years, building a case. When they finally moved, they arrested 17 people in coordinated raids. Dad was among them. They offered me a deal, Dad said. Cooperate fully and they'd protect my family. Refuse, and I'd spend 30 to 40 years in prison while Vincent and his people had free access to you and your mother. What choice did I have? He asked. And for the first time in my life, I heard my father sound broken. Mom's story was even more heartbreaking. She'd grown up believing her family's restaurant was just a restaurant. She'd known some of her relatives were involved in questionable activities, but the women in the family were kept deliberately ignorant of the details. I didn't find out the truth until after you were born, Mom said. Vincent sat me down and explained that your father was working for the family in ways that weren't exactly legal. He said it was normal, that all family businesses had arrangements like this. When the FBI raids happened, Mom's entire world collapsed overnight. Her husband was arrested. Her family was destroyed. Her father died of a heart attack 3 days after Vincent was sentenced. I had to choose, Mom said, crying now. Between my husband and my family, between your safety and my heritage. She'd chosen us. Do you regret it? I asked. Both parents looked at me in surprise. Do you regret choosing us over them? Dad was quiet for a long moment. I regret that the choice had to be made at all. I regret getting involved with people who made violence their business. I regret that Tyler and you have had to pay for my mistakes. He paused. But I don't regret keeping you alive. Mom nodded. We lost everything. Our families, our identities, our history. But we kept you and Tyler safe. That has to count for something. I looked at both of them. These people who'd sacrificed everything to protect us. Who'd given up their identities, their families, their entire existence to keep us breathing. But I also saw the people who'd robbed Tyler and me of our heritage, our culture, our right to know who we really were. What happens now? I asked. We pack tonight, Dad said. Marshall Webb has new identities ready. We'll be the Patterson family by next week. And then what? We do this again in another 15 years when one of Vincent's lieutenants gets released? We keep running forever? Mom wiped her eyes. What choice do we have? I looked at both of them, really looked at them, and realized they'd been asking themselves the same question for 15 years. There is another choice, I said slowly. They waited. We stop running. Dad's face went white. Absolutely not. You don't understand what you're suggesting. I understand perfectly. Uncle Vincent wants you dead. He wants our whole family destroyed. Running just delays the inevitable and ruins our lives in the process. So what are you proposing? Mom asked. That we just wait here for him to find us? I'm proposing we find him first. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma, Sophia, Dad said carefully. Vincent isn't just some angry relative. He's a career criminal with resources and connections we can't even imagine. But he's also a 72-year-old man who just spent 15 years in prison, I countered. His organization is scattered. Most of his allies are dead or in prison themselves. And most importantly, he's angry, which means he's not thinking clearly. I pulled out my phone and showed them what I'd discovered that morning. He's staying at the Marriott downtown under his own name. He's not hiding because he thinks he's untouchable. He's been posting on social media for crying out loud. Look, I showed them Vincent's Facebook page, which he'd apparently created upon his release. Photos of him at the prison gates, a check-in at a Chicago restaurant, a post about visiting old friends and settling old business. This isn't a criminal mastermind anymore, I continued. This is a bitter old man who wants revenge more than he wants to be smart about getting it. Mom was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. What exactly are you suggesting we do? We contact Marshall Webb. We tell her we want to help set up a sting operation. Vincent wants Dad? Fine. Let's give him what he wants, with the FBI watching every move. Dad shook his head violently. I won't use my family as bait. We're already bait, I said. We've been bait for 15 years. The only difference is whether we're running scared or taking control of the situation. I pulled out my laptop and showed them more of what I'd discovered. Vincent made reservations at Benedetto's, the old family restaurant, for tomorrow night. Table for 4. He's planning to meet people there, probably associates who've been tracking us for him. Mom's face went completely pale. How do you know that? Because I called and pretended to be confirming the reservation. The hostess was very chatty about how exciting it was to have Mr. Vincent back after all these years. I looked at both of them. This is our chance. He's going to be in a public place, probably with minimal security because he thinks he's safe. If Marshall Webb sets up surveillance, no, Dad said firmly. I won't risk your lives for my mistakes. They're not just your mistakes anymore, I said quietly. The moment you decided to have children while living this lie, you made it our problem too. Tyler and I deserve the chance to live normal lives without looking over our shoulders. I stood up and went to the window, looking out at our quiet suburban street. I've been thinking about this all night. What kind of life is Tyler going to have? He can't ever use social media freely. He can't pursue careers that require background checks. He can't form deep relationships because he can never tell anyone who he really is. I turned back to my parents. And what happens when one of us gets seriously injured and needs medical records we don't have? What happens when Tyler wants to get married and his bride's family does a background check? What happens when we have children and they ask about their grandparents? Mom was crying again, but she was also nodding slowly. She's right, she whispered. We can't keep doing this to them. Dad stared at us both, and I could see the exact moment he realized we weren't the helpless children he'd been protecting anymore. If we do this, he said finally, we do it properly. Full federal protection, professional surveillance, and if anything goes wrong, anything at all, we disappear forever. No arguments, no delays. I nodded. Agreed. He pulled out Marshall Webb's card. Apparently, he'd been carrying it with him for weeks. I'll make the call, he said. 3 hours later, Marshall Patricia Webb was sitting in our living room, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with graying brown hair and the kind of alert eyes that suggested she'd seen too much. She wore a simple blue suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd spent years dealing with dangerous people. This is highly irregular, she said for the 4th time. Using protected witnesses as operational assets goes against every protocol we have. But it could work, I insisted. Vincent wants a meeting with Dad. We can give him one. Marshall Webb looked at Dad. You understand what you're volunteering for? If Vincent suspects this is a setup, he won't just disappear. He'll escalate. Dad's voice was steady. I've been running from this man for 15 years. I'm tired of being afraid. And your children? Are you willing to risk their lives for closure? We're willing to risk our lives for freedom, I answered before Dad could respond. This isn't about revenge. It's about ending this cycle so Tyler and I can have real futures. Marshall Webb studied all of us for a long moment. I could see her weighing risks, calculating odds, probably thinking about how she'd explain this to her superiors if things went wrong. If we do this, she said finally, it's by federal rules. Professional agents, controlled environment, multiple backup plans. You don't freelance, you don't improvise. You follow instructions exactly as given. We all nodded. And if Vincent brings backup we're not prepared for, or if the situation becomes unsafe in any way, we abort immediately. You disappear that night and you never surface as the Morrison family again. Understood, Dad said. Marshall Webb made several phone calls, speaking in careful code with people whose names I'd probably never know. While she talked, I thought about Tyler, still at school, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. When she hung up from the last call, her expression was grim. We're going to do this, she said, but not at the restaurant. Too many civilians, too many variables. We're going to arrange a different meeting location. She pulled out a tablet and showed us photos of a warehouse district across town. Industrial area, mostly abandoned after 6 p.m. We can control access points, position agents, and ensure no innocent bystanders get caught in crossfire if things go wrong. How do we get Vincent to agree to meet there instead of the restaurant? I asked. We're going to tell him Dad wants to surrender himself in exchange for leaving the rest of the family alone, Marshall Webb said. It's exactly the kind of dramatic gesture Vincent's ego would demand. She showed us psychological profiles the FBI had developed on Vincent during his incarceration. The man was driven by pride, by the need to feel powerful and respected. Having Anthony Rossetti beg for his family's lives would be irresistible to him. Men like Vincent need to feel like they've won, Marshall Webb explained. They need their enemies to acknowledge defeat publicly. It's not enough to just kill someone. They need to break them first. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Dad would call Vincent directly, a number Marshall Webb's team had obtained through surveillance, and request a meeting. He'd claim that 15 years of running had broken him, that he wanted to face the consequences of his betrayal like a man. You'll tell him you're tired of looking over your shoulder, Marshall Webb instructed Dad. That you want to make a deal. Your life in exchange for leaving Catherine, Sophia, and Marco alone. Will he believe that? Mom asked. He'll want to believe it, Marshall Webb said. Vincent spent 15 years fantasizing about this moment. The chance to have his brother-in-law grovel for mercy? He'll take that meeting. We spent the rest of the afternoon rehearsing exactly what Dad would say. Every word was scripted, every possible response anticipated. Marshall Webb's team had studied Vincent's speech patterns, his psychological triggers, his ego weaknesses. Remember, she told Dad, you're a broken man who's run out of options. You're not being brave, you're being desperate. That's what Vincent wants to see. When Tyler came home from school, we told him Dad was working on a special project that required some security consultations. He was too distracted by basketball playoffs and an upcoming dance to pay much attention, but I caught him looking at me strangely a few times. Are you okay? He asked me while we were making dinner. You seem weird today. Just stressed about college applications. I lied. He nodded, accepting the explanation easily. At 14, he still believed that teenage anxiety was the worst thing in the world. That evening, Dad made the call. We all gathered around the kitchen table, with Marshall Webb and 2 other agents listening on monitoring equipment. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure the microphones would pick it up. Dad dialed the number with steady hands. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Yeah? Vincent? It's Tony. A long pause. When Vincent spoke again, his voice was soft and dangerous. Well, Anthony Rossetti. I was wondering when you'd call. I want to meet, Dad said, following the script perfectly. Just you and me. We need to talk. Oh, we're going to talk, Tony. We're going to have a very long conversation about family loyalty. I know what I did was wrong, Dad said, and the pain in his voice wasn't entirely acting. I've spent 15 years regretting it. But my family, they don't deserve to pay for my choices. Vincent laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. Your family? You mean my sister and her children? The niece and nephew I haven't seen since they were babies because their father decided to become a rat? I'll make it right, Dad said. Whatever you want from me, I'll give you. Just leave Catherine and the kids alone. Another pause. I could almost hear Vincent's mind working, savoring the moment. You know what, Tony? I think we should meet. But not at some public place where you might have friends waiting. Somewhere private. Somewhere we can really talk. Name the place, Dad said. Vincent gave him an address. The warehouse district Marshall Webb had already prepared. Tomorrow night, 9 o'clock. Come alone, and come ready to make things right. I'll be there, Dad said. You better be. Because if you don't show, I'm going to pay a visit to that nice house on Maple Street where Catherine's been living. And I'm going to have a long conversation with my nephew about what happens to traders' children. The line went dead. Marshall Webb was already on her radio, coordinating with her team. Target confirmed for tomorrow 9 p.m. All units prepare for operation. I looked at Dad, who was staring at the phone like it might explode. He knows where we live, Mom whispered. He's known for weeks, Marshall Webb said. Vincent's just been playing with you, waiting for the right moment. This call gives us the advantage. Now we control when and where the confrontation happens. That night, our house was transformed into a federal command center. Agents installed monitoring equipment, ran communication checks, and briefed Dad on exactly what to say and do during the meeting. Meanwhile, Tyler remained completely oblivious. We told him the agents were security consultants helping Dad with a work project. He bought the story completely, even asking one of the agents about FBI recruitment requirements for a school project. Kid's got good instincts, the agent told me later. He'd make a good federal agent himself someday. The irony wasn't lost on me. Thursday night, Marshall Webb pulled me aside. Last chance to change your mind, she said. Once this starts, there's no going back. If things go wrong tomorrow night, your family might have to disappear permanently. New names, new faces, no contact with anyone from your current life. I know, I said, but we can't keep living like this. Tyler deserves to know who he really is. We all do, she nodded. Your father's lucky to have you. No, I said, watching Dad rehearse his lines with the agents for the dozenth time. We're lucky to have each other. Friday evening arrived with unseasonable rain, the kind of weather that made everything seem more ominous, more final. At 7 p.m., Tyler left for the school dance. I hugged him goodbye, memorizing the feel of it in case it was the last time I'd see him as Emma Morrison's little brother. Have fun, I told him. You're being weird again, he said, but he was grinning. Must be a girl thing. If only he knew. Dad kissed Mom goodbye at 8:30 p.m., and for a moment, I saw them as Anthony and Catherine Rossetti, young people in love who'd made terrible choices and spent 15 years paying for them. I love you, Mom whispered. I love you too, he replied. All of this, everything we've been through, it was worth it to keep you and the kids safe. I hugged him at the door. Be careful, Dad. He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since I'd discovered the truth. I will. And when this is over, we're going to have a very long conversation about our real family history, the good parts you never got to know. 2 FBI vehicles followed Dad to the warehouse district, maintaining careful distance. Marshall Webb and her team were already in position, with agents disguised as homeless people, maintenance workers, and late-shift employees. Mom and I waited at home, listening to radio chatter from the command post they'd set up in our garage. At 8:47 p.m., Vincent arrived at the warehouse. He wasn't alone. 3 vehicles, came the report over the radio. Target plus 5 associates, all appear armed. My heart sank. This wasn't the small, manageable operation we'd planned for. Abort? Came a voice over the radio. Negative, Marshall Webb's voice responded. We proceed. All units maintain position. At 9:02 p.m., Dad's car pulled into the warehouse parking lot. Lone Wolf is in position, came the report. Lone Wolf was Dad's code name. For the next 20 minutes, we listened to Vincent and Dad's conversation through the wire Dad was wearing. Every word was clear, recorded for posterity and legal proceedings. Vincent had spent those 20 minutes detailing exactly what he'd planned to do to our family, how he'd tracked us through social media posts from Tyler's basketball games, how he'd been paying informants to watch for any sign of the Rossetti family in small towns across the Midwest. I'm a patient man, Tony, Vincent's voice said through the radio speakers. I can wait decades if I have to, but nobody betrays the Benedetti family and lives to enjoy it. Dad's voice was steady despite everything. My family had nothing to do with my choices, Vincent. They were children. They're Rosettis, Vincent replied. That's enough. Then Vincent made his fatal mistake. You know what I'm going to do, Tony? I'm going to kill you first so you can't warn them. Then I'm going to visit Catherine. I'm going to make her watch while I kill Marco, slowly so she understands what betrayal costs. And then I'm going to keep Sophia alive long enough to make her pay for being your daughter. That was the signal Marshall Webb had been waiting for. All units go, came her voice over the radio. The next few minutes were chaos. Shouting voices, the sound of vehicles moving, Vincent screaming at his associates to kill the rat, then gunshots. Mom grabbed my hand so tightly I thought she might break bones. We listened to the radio chatter, trying to piece together what was happening. Target down, lone wolf secure, 2 suspects in custody, 1 fled on foot, medical needed at staging area 2. That last transmission made my blood freeze. Dad? Mom whispered to the radio, as if it could hear her. 20 minutes later, Marshall Webb's voice came through clearly. All clear, operation successful, Lone Wolf is safe. We cried, both of us clutching each other in our kitchen while federal agents dismantled their equipment around us. Dad came home an hour later, shaken, but unharmed. Vincent was dead, killed in the shootout when he'd pulled a gun on federal agents. 3 of his associates were in custody. 2 others had fled but were being tracked by FBI teams across 3 states. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Vincent's revenge plan. He'd spent years in prison building a network of contacts, offering payment to anyone who could provide information about the Rossetti family's location. He'd been planning to torture Dad's entire family before killing them, then display their bodies as a warning to anyone else who might consider betraying organized crime families. 6 months later, we sat in a federal courthouse as Vincent's surviving associates were sentenced for conspiracy to commit murder, violation of federal witness protection laws, and a dozen other felonies. The trial revealed details that made our 15 years of running seem like a picnic compared to what Vincent had actually been planning. After the sentencing, Marshall Webb handed us a choice we'd never expected to have. "You can stay in witness protection as the Morrison family," she said. "Vincent's dead, but there might be others who still hold grudges. Or you can reclaim your real identities. The threat assessment shows minimal ongoing risk." The decision wasn't as easy as I'd expected. Tyler, who'd learned the truth after Vincent's death, was struggling with the revelation that his entire identity had been fabricated. He'd gone through weeks of counseling, trying to process the fact that he was Marco Rossetti, not Tyler Morrison. "I don't know how to be Marco," he'd told me one night. "Tyler Morrison plays basketball and gets good grades and has normal problems. Marco Rossetti is the son of a snitch whose uncle tried to kill his family. Which one am I supposed to be?" Mom was torn between the life she'd built and the life she'd lost. She'd started having dreams about her father, who died while we were in hiding. Dreams where he forgave her for choosing Dad over the family. Dreams where she got to say goodbye. Dad wanted whatever would make us happiest, but I could see the guilt eating at him. He'd saved our lives, but at the cost of our heritage, our culture, our connection to extended family who might not even know we were still alive. I wanted our real names back, but more than that, I wanted Tyler to have the choice to decide who he wanted to be. In the end, we compromised. We kept our current lives, but reclaimed our heritage. Tyler Morrison Rossetti, David Morrison Rossetti, Linda Morrison Rossetti, and me, Emma Morrison Rossetti. It was clunky, but it felt honest. We moved back to Chicago 6 months ago, not to our old neighborhood, too many painful memories, but to a small apartment near the lake where we could start fresh as our real selves. I enrolled in college under my real name. Tyler joined a new basketball team where he could be honest about his background. Mom and Dad started marriage counseling to work through 15 years of forced intimacy under assumed identities. The transition wasn't easy. We had to relearn how to be ourselves after spending so many years being other people. Simple things like signing our names or introducing ourselves to new people required conscious thought. But slowly, we began to remember who we'd been before we became the Morrisons. Mom started cooking Italian food again. Recipes her mother had taught her that she'd avoided for 15 years because they reminded her of what she'd lost. The smell of garlic and basil in our kitchen made her cry the first few times, but they were good tears. Dad reached out to his surviving relatives, cousins, and aunts who'd had no idea what had happened to Anthony Rossetti and his family. Some wanted nothing to do with us, still angry about his testimony, but others welcomed us back with open arms, grateful to learn we were alive. Tyler struggled the most with the adjustment. He'd spent 10 years building Tyler Morrison's personality, and discovering that it was all artificial left him feeling hollow. He went through a phase where he insisted everyone call him Marco, then switched back to Tyler, then settled on Tyler Marco, using his middle name as a bridge between his identities. "I don't know if I'm Italian or American or both or neither," he told our counselor during one family session. "I don't know if I like basketball because I really like it or because Tyler Morrison was supposed to like it." It took months of therapy for him to understand that interests don't have ethnicities, that the person he'd become was real even if his name had been fake. Last week, I visited Benedetto's restaurant. It's under new management now, a young couple who bought it from the state after the Benedetti assets were seized. They've transformed it into a modern Italian fusion place, serving creative dishes alongside traditional ones. But they kept some of the old family photos on the walls, treating them as historical artifacts rather than personal memories. I found a picture of myself as a toddler, sitting on Uncle Vincent's lap at what must have been a Christmas celebration. We're both smiling. He's holding me like I'm precious to him, like I'm the most important thing in his world. Looking at that photo, I understood something I'd never grasped before. Vincent wasn't evil because he was born that way. He'd loved me once. He'd been part of a family that laughed together and celebrated together and protected each other. But somewhere along the way, loyalty became obsession, protection became control, love became possession. The same qualities that make families strong can destroy them if they're taken too far. I asked the restaurant owners if I could have a copy of the photo. They said yes, probably thinking I was just a customer who found the historical images interesting. Now it sits on my desk at home, next to a recent photo of our reconstructed family. In the old picture, I'm laughing on Vincent's lap, completely trusting and innocent. In the new picture, I'm standing between my parents and Tyler, all of us smiling, but with eyes that have seen too much. The contrast tells the whole story of who we were, who we became, and who we're trying to be now. Tyler asked me once whether I regretted discovering the truth about our family. I told him no, but that wasn't entirely honest. I regret that we lost 15 years of being ourselves. I regret that Tyler never got to know our grandmother before she died of heartbreak over losing her family. I regret that we missed weddings and graduations and ordinary family moments that could have been beautiful instead of dangerous. But I don't regret that Dad chose our safety over his family's loyalty. I don't regret that we got the chance to become people instead of just survivors. And I don't regret learning that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is run away, as long as you eventually find the strength to stop running and reclaim your life. These days, when people ask about our unusual hyphenated last name, I tell them it's complicated. But the truth is, family is always complicated. Some families are complicated because of divorce, or adoption, or blended households. Our family is complicated because we had to choose between love and loyalty, between heritage and survival, between the people we were born to be and the people we needed to become. It's just that some complications are worth 15 years of false identities and federal protection, and others are worth a lifetime of figuring out who you really are underneath all the lies you've been told, and telling yourself about who you're supposed to be. The funny thing is, I'm more myself now than I ever was as either Emma Morrison or the child I was before we went into hiding. Maybe that's because I finally understand that identity isn't just about names or heritage or family history. It's about the choices you make when everything you thought you knew turns out to be wrong. It's about who you decide to be when you discover that who you've been was never really you at all.